In this lesson, we're going to talk about one of Harvard's 2 required supplemental questions. Harvard only has 2 required questions. We're going to talk about how we're going to use that along with the adult hero to answer not just a challenging Harvard question, but a question that appears on so many different applications. So let me start out with Harvard's question. Your intellectual life, by the way, Princeton's application is the hardest. Harvard's application is the most devious. And I'm going to show you the secret code that's going on here. You might at this point be able to figure it out yourself though. Here's the question. Your intellectual life may extend beyond the academic requirements of your particular school. Please use the space below to list additional intellectual activities that you have not mentioned or detailed elsewhere in your application. These could include, but are not limited to, supervised or self-directed projects not done as schoolwork, training experiences, online courses not run by your school, or summer academic or research programs not described elsewhere. Now, if you understand the importance of the hero who explores the uncharted and the adult hero who rejects and repudiates one view of the guide, which of those ones is right should be obvious. But in case you didn't pick up on it, that's okay. Most people don't their first time. The correct answer, by the way, is self-directed projects not done as schoolwork. That's going to show the most independence of spirit. It's going to show this idea of uncharted territory. It's going to give you plenty of opportunities to reject and repudiate the guide. Now, this independent research that you do is something that we call the intellectual question focal point. Or you can just call it an intellectual research question. The intellectual question focal point is basically something that you research independently. And it's going to be something that you become the world's leading expert in. In fact, if you work with us, or if you work on your own, we're actually going to recommend that you write a book on this topic. You're going to be the world's foremost expert on this topic. Now you might say, wait a second, how am I supposed to do that? I'm really interested in space. I can't be the world's leading expert in space. Yeah, space is probably not a great idea. In fact, you're going to want to pick a small, narrowly focused idea and make that something that you explore deeply. Chelsea, who's the other head of this company that runs the college strategy program with me, talks about 2 books that are so great, such great examples. One is just about salt. The other one is a book entirely about the color blue. They're both fascinating books. They both have such great ideas in them, and they both show that by focusing on a small area, you can become the leading expert on a topic, as well as just a compelling and engaging part of an intellectual community. That is the literal most valuable thing you can be to any Ivy League college. Your intellectual question focal point, by the way, you can also use when you're answering questions about what you want to major in. If you're applying to Duke, Duke has 2 types of programs. Program 1, where you major in, say, chemistry or something else normal, economics, whatever. They also have Program 2, where you create a research question and you build your undergraduate experience around that research question. You should probably have figured out by now that Program 2 is the right program. If you're applying to Duke, you should probably talk about Program 2 and show how it's an extension of an intellectual research question that you have already started exploring. If you're applying to any other college that allows an independent major, which most competitive colleges do, again, you should do the same thing. Make your major the same thing as your intellectual question focal point. Make it a natural extension of the research that you have already started doing. But I want to show you how you can use your intellectual question focal point, your intellectual research question, to answer one of the most weird questions that you see in college admissions. And that question is, why do you want to come to this college? What a weird question. I mean, why do you want to go to Yale? It's a great college. I mean, why does that need explanation? Well, as it turns out, if you use your intellectual research question, your intellectual question focal point, and combine the adult hero, you can create an incredibly effective answer to that essay question. Here's how it works. You start out with a very focused research question. Let's say it's salt. I don't know, let's say it's the Irish experience from 1910 to 1911. Let's say it's the color blue. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to be something very specific where you have, at this point, established yourself as a real expert on it. Not a pretend expert. You're actually going to be an actual expert on this thing. So here's what you do. if to answer the question, you tap into this intellectual question focal point, and you're also going to tap into one other thing. This other thing is something that's so weird, it shocked me when I first discovered it. I was at a book reading by the author Jeffrey Eugenides. Jeffrey Eugenides went to my alma mater, Brown University. And somebody asked him why he chose to go to Brown University. I thought to myself, what a silly question. It's at the time it would have been, the most popular Ivy. I mean, there's no real reason not to go there. But his answer I'll never forget. He talked about a specific professor at Brown that he wanted to do research with, that he wanted to study with, who was doing some cool stuff with fiction. He wanted to work with that professor. So he picked the college based on one person. Now, I was so stunned by that. I'd never imagined such an answer. So then I asked this question to a lot of other people. And here's what I realized. When I asked this question to people who are doing a non-professional graduate degree, so not law, medicine, or business, but any kind of more, nerd-oriented graduate school, looking for a master's degree or a PhD, when I looked at that, when I asked people that question who are doing that type of graduate study, they all gave the same answer. They talked about a specific person, specific research. So we're going to put all these things together, this idea of talking about a specific professor, which is common among people or academics, the adult hero, which is rejecting and repudiating the guide, and your intellectual question focal point, and talk about how to answer that question. Here's how you do it. You start out by talking about your own research so far, very briefly introduce the research you've done in this intellectual area. Then you talk about a professor at that college where his research is in some way relevant to yours. It doesn't have to be identical to yours. In fact, it shouldn't. It just needs to be in some way arguably relevant. If you're researching the color blue, that professor might be a professor of art. He might be a professor of physics. He might be a professor who looks specifically at optics. He could be all kinds. That doesn't have to be an exact match. You talk about some piece of his research. Now you've done that part of showing interest in the intellectual side of things. Now we're going to take it one step further. We're going to bring in the adult hero. You're going to argue why one of that professor's views, remember the professor is now the guide, you're going to argue against one of his views. You're going to reject and repudiate a fundamental view of the guide. And again, that is how you establish yourself as the adult hero. Now, all of these pieces fit together. And fitting them together can be a bit of a logistical challenge. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to start to think about organizing the next few years of your life, or if you only have a few months left, the next few months of your life, to be able to create the components of a winning Ivy application. In this video, though, I want you to keep in mind this idea of specificity. Notice that for this to work, your research topic has to be highly, highly specific. It can't just be biology, but it certainly could be a very small piece of biology. It can't be just chemicals in general, but it could just be salt. Again, we're talking about there's an actual book that's just about salt, and what a great book it is. By focusing on something very specific, we establish ourselves as focused on intellectual pursuits. By going against the guide, we establish ourselves as the adult hero. Now in the next video, I'm going to start to show you how to organize the logistics of this. And then after that, we're going to actually have a video where we introduce the final archetype that you're going to use in your college strategy. You're going to use these techniques to help yourself stand out so that you can get in.